Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student, Stacy Raine.
Today we're going to get a little serious and discuss the issues of poverty, criminal justice, mass incarceration, and post-prison reentry into society. Because Hempstead, Uniondale, Roosevelt, and Freeport are all local examples of communities impacted by all of the above. And we're going to talk to some fabulous people, some of which have spent time behind bars and have reentered society with the goal to help others in the same situation.
Yes, Stacy, and they've started a group called the Community Re-Entry Consortium. The steering committee has formally incarcerated individuals, social workers, academics from local colleges and universities, among others.
One of our guests today is Marcellus Morris, who was born in Florida, moved around the country, got himself into serious trouble with a gang. He moved to Freeport here on Long Island, but before graduating high school, he was charged and convicted of first-degree robbery. He's out now, ready to change the mindset of men and women in our community.
We're also happy to welcome to our show Demar Tyson, who has also spent time in both the New York State as well as the federal prison system, and has now become the founder of the Community Re-Entry Consortium. He's the owner of and publisher of Urban Life News magazine, a hip-hop, culture, and criminal justice-based publication. Demar also gives back to the community by cutting hair at Nassau County's Juvenile Detention Center while giving insight and critical thinking skills to the young people housed there.
And finally, we'd also love to welcome through the magic of Zoom, Antonia Codling, a criminal defense attorney who for the past 25 years has been fighting for justice and never giving up.
Marcellus, can you tell us your story?
Well, my story, as the bio indicator, is I was born in Miami, Florida. I was adopted at the time by a wonderful family. I got fortunate, Alfred and Dorothy Morris. I moved around a lot because my father changed jobs, so I moved to Philadelphia. I would say in the first grade. From Philly, I also got structure outside by swimming. A lot of swimming under Jim Ellis. A movie was made on his life called Pride. So from the first through the seventh grade, I had great structure. After the seventh grade, I had to move to Chicago. When I moved to Chicago, that's when the problem started. I stopped swimming. I started to play sports, basketball and football, but I also started to flirt with gang activity. My mother and father, they were going through their issues or whatever, so they broke up. At a certain time, a young man needs his father. And at that time, I really didn't have his father. I'm not blaming my father for my choices. I'm just realizing, looking back. After Chicago, I was getting in a little trouble. That's how I moved to Freeport, New York. Sometimes you can take a person out of a situation, but if that person still has the same mentality, he's going to get with the same people and do the same things. And that's kind of what happened to me. I got with the wrong crowd. I was the wrong crowd and wound up robbing a jewelry store, wound up catching 7 to 21 years. That was pivotal in my life because I was 17 years old, my first time incarcerated in E2 Nassau County. Traumatizing, bunch of adolescents in one space with no supervision. So in that space, you see a lot, you learn a lot, but you learn the wrong things. After my incarceration, I still didn't get it. I did 9 years. I went to the parole board, got hit with 2 years, and came home and doing 9 years. But my mentality, although I was going to school, my mentality was still streets and stuff like that. So I wound up catching another bid after the 9 years in Texas for carrying marijuana. Changed my life. Did 18 months in Texas. It was totally different from New York State. Almost like slavery, real slavery, where you got to get up in the morning and go to the fields, pick watermelons, potatoes, or whatever the case it is. Came back to New York because when you're on parole, you have to come back to the state that you were originally arrested in, and got into the moving business. But I changed, left all crime alone, but I didn't change my street mentality, meaning that I stuck to certain codes and things of that nature, and got into a situation with the owner of a company where he tried to jip me with money. So I threatened him. He told my parole officer. My parole officer locked me up for parole violation, for having an Army Swiss knife on me that I used to cut the boxes and everything with. And out of frustration inside of Nassau County, I caught an assault on a CO. I wound up blowing trial, and doing another 6 years. After that, I came home, totally changed, and start working in the re-entry field. So as we go on, I'll tell more of my story and how it fits in. Go ahead.
That's a great start. No, I mean, I'm sitting here with my mouth open because this is all so new to us, Stacy.
Yeah, it's a powerful story. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that's happened to you, but you've done all this and you've gotten out of jail and you've been doing some really amazing things. So now you're helping others. So who was there to help you? And
when I first came home, first of all, you have to change starts with inside. So I was already on my way. You want to ask that again? I was already on my way to changing from the inside this time. My mother had passed away. So that's an intense hurt. When you lose your mother and you're incarcerated, you can't go to the funeral and all of that. So that's an intense pain. So this time I came home, I finished school. I was 2 classes away from a BA degree, so St. John's University helped me. I worked in the field. My first job was with LTI, Leadership Training Institute, mentoring youth. I worked at FCA. I worked through the DA's office with a re-entry program. So all those things were me giving back, but also receiving a check for it, something that could sustain me. Because those are one of the keys, too. You have to have some sort of employment, but we'll get into all that later. So those are some of the key people. Now, we've met key people together who put us together. Gary Pryboy inside of the prison system, and he made sure that me and him connected on the outside. So we have formed a bond in the group that met weekly to keep each other on point and in focus.
Oh, that's good.
Stacey, I'm listening to the answers from Marcellus. What a great voice you have.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to a football game. If you were announcing, I would listen. And whatever you say, when you say stop making noise or it's time to leave, I would follow your direction. You just have a powerful, very commanding.
That's probably because I'm so close to the microphone. It's vibrating.
That could be, but no, you have a great speaking voice. Now, Demar, let's hear your story. Can you tell us about your life?
My name is Demar Tyson. I'm born and raised in Freeport, New York, in 1974. To just give some context, oftentimes when we tell our story, we're speaking from the past. We're not speaking from the present. So we're talking about what we've been through and the journey that made us who and what we are today. And so born and raised in Freeport, New York. I lived with my grandmother, my mother. Later came my little sister. My father wasn't around. He was in the next town, but I never saw him. So there was no immediate father influence. I had father figures in my uncles, 2 uncles, both very different, but both very loving and leaders of the family. And I had a decent childhood living with my grandmother. My mother, unfortunately, blessings to her soul, she ran the streets, in and out. She was always there, always worked and provided for my sister and I, but she had some traumas that she was dealing with as a young mother, and so I was raised by a grandmother, which was common for the youth growing up. And even now, a lot of times the grandmothers are the raisers of the children. They keep the family. And so I was thankful for having a wonderful childhood in that regard. I didn't never go without or had all the things that I needed. That's when kids wasn't on video games all day. We was outside playing basketball, riding our bikes, playing tag, rugby, etc., doing all the things that we watch on TV now. But as I began to get older and my mother progressively went deeper into the trenches of life and the streets, and I don't want to say that my mother was a street person, I tried to speak about her experiences while honoring her memory at the same time, but she went deeper into whatever she was going through. And so we moved from my grandmother's house to Roosevelt, New York. And during them 2 years of going to Roosevelt High School was very different. I made a new set of friends, but the house, my home life was drastic. We didn't have. Now, I guess outside of the shelter of my grandmother's home, I begin to feel the full effects of not having what the other kids were having. Not having the proper food in the refrigerator. I remember one time not having deodorant. Just wearing the same clothes over and over. It got so bad that we eventually went back to my grandmother's house. But I'm sorry, we didn't go back to my grandmother's house. We moved now from one part of Freeport to a very different part called Buffalo Housing Projects, New York, Freeport, New York, as we call the projects. The difference between the 2 locations where I grew up, they were about a half a mile apart. But the difference is the community. You know, we're playing basketball, we're playing tag, we're doing kid things. Now we're moving to an aspect of Freeport where there's drug dealing, robberies, shooting, crime is at an all-time high. It feels like this community was taken from out of Brooklyn respectfully and dropped in the end of Freeport in its own little space. And so now crime is at my doorstep. And all my friends have begun to take their journeys into making money alternative ways, you know, selling drugs, little petty robberies, just kind of like in the selling marijuana in a childish kind of way, but in an adult world. And I mentioned Roosevelt because that cultivated my mindset and made me susceptible to try something different. But I'm like, I got to do something different. It's rough. You know, I got to try to help out my mother. It's always help your mother, you know, that old drug dealer's fantasy or, you know, not to glorify, but just to give you some real insight about what goes on in the mind of young people so that you can identify that we're trying to figure out a way to change our family structure. But we're also children. So once you start to take a dabble into street culture and you receive some financial gains from it, you forget what your objective is and you start to satisfy self. That eventually led to my first incarceration at the age of 16. Like Marcellus, I went to Nassau County. I did a 1 to 3 for an attempted armed robbery. I came home at 17. Shortly after, I violated parole by stealing a hat at a Marshall's. I went back to Nassau County for 6 months. This time they sent me to an adolescent prison in upstate New York, in Comstock, New York, called Washington Correctional Facility. Much different than my first experience. It's wild. It's out of control. And the thing about prison that they don't tell you is that in order to survive prison, and this goes all the way back to Nassau County, I didn't get into that, but we can perhaps touch on that at some other point. But in order to survive prison, you got to change who you are, how you think, and how you look at survival. Because just imagine being on the gallery of 20 cells, the kids' ages ranging from 16 to 18, and these guys looking like professional football players because the weights are in there and they're humongous, but they got nothing to do. So we just, whatever can come to our mind is what we're utilizing to occupy our time. Mm-hmm. And like Marcellus said, there's no monitoring. The officer only walks past every 15 minutes. So within that 15 minutes of walking is hell. Mm-hmm. Guys are getting hit with soap and socks. You washing clothes. People are getting their commissary taken. You know, guys are eating it right in your face. You know, just to give you an idea of what takes place inside there. So oftentimes you go to prison for a punishment, but if you don't somewhat change who you are, you won't survive.
You are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Stacy Raine, here with Bill Horan, and today we're learning about the Community Re-Entry Consortium. Our guests are Marcellus Morris and Demar Tyson, who both spent time in prison and are now back in the community and trying to improve not only their lives, but the lives of other people who have had similar life journeys. And Antonia Codling, who we're going to talk to next, a criminal defense attorney who for the past 25 years has been fighting for justice and never giving up.
Now, Demar, I just have to say to you, you used a very key word in there, survival. You're 16 years old at the time, right? Between 16 and 18. And as you said, there's a code. Like if people go to college, they know how to act. If they're in a science school or a medical school, there's a certain code that they have to live up to in cleanliness and doing experiments, etc. That must have been, I just can't even experience it, that if you break that code, there's this guy with muscles bigger than an NFL player who is going to impress you and make a point of saying, you better follow this code and in a not nice way.
Exactly, and it's key that you use that word, right? Because that demonstrates your wisdom. The code, it's a new way of something working, right? Whether it works for negative or positive, in there it works in the way that it works. And so it's not oftentimes the big guy who's 300 pounds, right? It's sometimes a 4'2" guy that's 160 pounds who runs everything.
Wow, see, even that
you see, because he learned the rules and regulations so well, and he followed them so hard that he becomes the one, and he has the heart of a lion, and he's the one who dictates policy.
Wow.
And he got the big guy doing whatever he wants them to do. And so it's just many levels, and the way that you survive is you find your space, right? You know, like when you're driving in the road, it says stay in your lane, and if you veer in another lane, you can perhaps cause an accident. It doesn't matter what your lane is in prison. You find your lane, and you honor it, and then inside that space is respect.
Gotcha.
You see, and so that's just the beginning. So ultimately, just to wrap it up for you, ultimately I came home and I ended up doing another robbery, which amounted to 11 years. Mm-hmm. I came home again 3.5 years later. I owned a personal training studio in Freeport. I still had one foot in the underworld. And so then I caught a federal guns charge, which led to another 3.5 years. And after that, I basically had enough. But to just rewind a little bit, in Nassau County, while fighting the federal gun charge, I met an amazing man called Gary Prybroy, which Marcellus has mentioned. He was the liaison. He connected us together when I came home. And, that was a friendship of, that's when we met. And we began this journey of re-entry and utilizing our experiences to reconnect with other men and women who are going through the same things that we went through, to community resources and gang intervention, critical thinking sessions as a man think of, et cetera, speaking at different colleges and universities. There were many steps and stages that we went through to get us to this point here, but that's just a generalized, portion of what we've been through that got us in this moment.
You two have so much life experience and wisdom, and I cannot wait to ask you a million questions, but I also want to introduce Antonia Codling to everyone. And so, Antonia, will you tell us about you and your practice and why you are involved in the reentry program?
I want to just start by saying thank you to you, Bill and Stacy. As you know, I'm on Zoom, so I'm watching you watch Marcellus and Demar tell their stories, and you're really engaged, and I appreciate your enthusiasm and interest in this topic. The way I came to be a criminal defense attorney is my inspiration was Judge Bruce Wright. He was a Supreme Court judge who sat on the bench, and he would set low or no bail for poor people who came before him. And basically, he just followed the Constitution, which said that bail should not be used as pretrial detention. Mm-hmm. And he caught some bad press for it. They nicknamed him Cut Him Loose Bruce because he wound up releasing somebody who went out and committed a new crime. But, honestly, once I became a criminal defense attorney, I wound up in the community about 7 years ago, 8 years maybe now, and I met Demar and Tyson, Demar and Marcellus, and I met so many people like them, meaning individuals who had been formerly incarcerated, also known now as returning citizens. And these returning citizens are in our communities in the 5 boroughs doing work with young people, trying to redirect the lives of youth who are at risk, who are maybe in a gang or carrying a gun. And they're providing opportunities and activities and training for these youth. And through that work, I met Tyson and Marcellus, and we have been fast friends.
She's the glue.
You heard that right, Antonia? You're the glue. You keep everything together. Now, Demar, you're founder of something called the Community Re-Entry Consortium. Tell us, what is that all about?
Well, I'm going to defer to Marcellus because actually Antonia, Marcellus, Leanna, Professor Leanna, Robert, and Victoria, and Christian, we all collectively are the founders. Okay. And so we came together to create a re-entry resource, a network of individuals who have to connect returning citizens to resources and opportunities that they need to make a positive re-entry back into society. And so before I touch on it, if it's okay with you, I'll allow Marcellus to speak about the inception, since he's the one who fostered the relationship with Bob Costello to even make this consortium a possibility.
Yes, please.
It goes a little deeper than Bob Costello. Mika Dashley.
Shout out to Mika.
Shout out to Mika.
She's the one that introduced me to Bob. Mm-hmm. So that's how the relationship started. So through those years, this was maybe seven years ago. So through that relationship, myself, Tyson, Antonia, and a number of others have been coming to Hofstra University, sometimes Nassau, speaking at the criminal justice classes. So out of that relationship, Bob introduced us to Leanne and Christine. And from that relationship right there, we said we need to start something, the CRC, Community Re-Entry Consortium, for returning citizens. It has 4 prongs, and we'll get into that later. Housing, education, healing, and advocacy. So that's the reason we created the CRC. We're only a year in existence, and in that year, it also dealt with planning, Zooms, and how to get it off the ground. We had one very successful event about the school-to-prison pipeline that was highly successful, and we're planning other things to come. So that's the basis of how the CRC got started. Our mission, as Tyson elaborated on, is to give individuals coming home a place to come to get educated, a place to come to get healed, a place to come to advocate if we have to advocate for them, and also the most important is also develop the housing component. So those are the 4 prongs.
Yeah, I just wanted to say and mention Mika Dashman is the founder and executive director of Restorative Justice Initiative, and both Marcellus and I are circle keepers, and another point of intersection in our lives was Mika Dashman, who is a resource for all things restorative justice and healing. And so we met through her. Professor Costello, who's a professor at Nassau Community College, who also teaches at Hofstra, was, how we intersected and how this CRC was started.
Now, you mentioned the term circle keepers. Could you tell us what that means?
Yes. So a circle keeper is someone who facilitates a healing circle, and the healing circle could be involving conflict, or it could just be community building. And Mika hosts an annual roundtable where there are many circles going on at the same time. People come together and discuss certain topics, and it's usually in the 5 boroughs. And Professor Costello is very interested in restorative justice, like Marcellus and I. And that's how we built our community, with the 3 of us. And then Professor Costello introduced us to some professors at Hofstra, and we're all very much like-minded and interested in the criminal legal system.
Mm-hmm. So is that what makes the CRC unique, or how does it differ from other organizations that do this kind of helping?
There's a lot of organizations that provide resources and connections and workshops for returning citizens. Having been a returning citizen myself, I know that oftentimes the reason why I created Urban Life News magazine, when I was coming home from incarceration, I saw within the eyes of men who were still there that they still had a lot of fight left in them, but they lacked the resources to help aid and assist them in their growth and development, reconnecting to the community, and finding the resources that were in the community that they needed. So in an effort to create a business, right, that would sustain me, but also fulfill the need to give back to these men, I came up with the idea of a hip hop magazine, which would be entertaining, right, and to provide a nice business structure. But it's like applesauce wrapped around aspirin. Within the hip hop stories and the models and the cars and the glitz and the music, there's articles and essays on criminal justice, demystifying it so that their families and friends can follow and begin to understand what the returning citizen is going through, while providing the returning citizen with how to reacclimate, how to get a credit card, first time buying a home, how to establish credit, what is due process, what is illegal possession, etc. And so that allowed me to reach individuals on a large scale versus connecting with one-on-one. But also, the purpose of the Re-Entry Consortium is to jump the gate over the monotony of, and this is not a shot at other organizations, but to get past some of the red tape that they put in front of returning citizens. Oftentimes, these organizations, they start out with a great energy and a great cause, but I believe the politics and the red tape, it stops them from really connecting with the people who deserve those services. And I mentioned the magazine because there's often men and women who are in prison who don't know that these organizations exist. So the Community Re-Entry Consortium, we vow to get the resources and information directly to the individuals who need it by way of workshops, events, resource fairs, and other different community outlets. So that's how we differ. We differ because once we screen you and see that there is a need there is a need in terms of one of the prongs that we provide, housing, healing, restorative justice, and advocacy, we utilize our resources by way of members of the board, from parole, probation, and other reentry organizations. We utilize our connections to help you kind of skip the line a little bit to get you right to quality housing, get you a job, get you gainfully employed.
Yeah, I mean, so important for being able to be a member of society, like the basic kind of things, right?
Yes.
Guys, I have to say this has been one of our most interesting shows and certainly educational for me. If someone is listening and they know someone who's coming back into society, or what was the term you used, a returning citizen,
Yes.
and this would be perfect for them or they need this help, how would they get in touch with you?
They could definitely reach us on social media. We're on Instagram as the Community Re-Entry Consortium on Instagram. We're in the stages of developing our Facebook and website and other means of social connections, LinkedIn, etc. And they can also email the one and only Antonia Codling or Leanne at Hofstra University, and we'll provide you guys with their exact emails, probably at the closing of the show or whatever.
And unfortunately, our time has gone much too quickly, but we want to thank Marcellus Morris, Demar Tyson, both of whom have spent time in the community prison system and have taken the time today to explain their lives and their journeys, and along with Antonia Codling, a criminal defense attorney who for the past 25 years has been fighting for justice and never giving up. Antonia, Demar, Marcellus, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Bill and
Thank you
Stacy.
so much.
I'm Bill Horan, along with Nassau Community College student Stacy Raine. We thank you for listening to this week's episode of My Hometown.
We'd like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC at ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.